All right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. My name is Julie, and I'm one of the librarians here at the Sunnyvale Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us for this Navratri presentation, 9/9 of the Feminine Divine. We're so glad you could be here today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We do have a large group with us tonight, so I do ask that you keep yourselves muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. They will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, but please put them in chat so we don't hear kids or dogs or anything like that in the background until everyone can hear our presentation. Let me do a brief introduction here. We have our two presenters. We've got Guy and Pushpita. They are Hindu-American Sunnyvale residents dedicated to helping the community understand the rich tapestry of the faith. And they're going to be speaking to us today and educating us about the wonderful festival of Navratri. Pushpita, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Julie, for that lovely introduction and also for setting up this event. We are very excited to be here today to share a little bit more about this beautiful, wonderful festival. And we just wanted to start with a quick namaste. So namaste to everybody. And my name is Pushpita Prasad. I'm here with Gayatri, who is, and we are both residents of the area, as Julie said. And I think, sorry, before, just a few logistical stuff, as Julie said, please keep it muted so that we don't talk over each other. We will have a few, as we go through this, we have slides, we also have videos. So bear with us if we have any technical difficulties, and apologies in advance. Everybody's familiar with the world of Zoom. And when it works beautifully. And when it doesn't, it can be a little frustrating. So let's hope for the former today. We will also have as we go through the slides, we'll have a couple of really simple quizzes. So you can just respond to that by typing in the answer number in the chat box, and we'll monitor that. It's not a trick question. It's just to see if you're picking up some of the basic things we're talking about. We'll also have some videos, as I mentioned before, and then we would love to get your questions on the topic, but let's hold them to the end so that we can go through the materials. So with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And I hope my slides come up. I think they did. So as Julie said, we are here today to talk about Navratri, which is the 9 nights of the Devi. And so let's go right in, assuming I have no technical difficulties, which I seem to be having because my slides are not advancing. Okay, there we go. So let's get right to the roots, right? What is Navratri? What does it mean? And why are we even here talking about it? So first of all, Navratri is known by many other names, Durga Puja, Dashera, Golu, Khombe, etc. But it derives from the ancient language of Sanskrit, which is sort of a root language of Hinduism, where most of our texts and sacred stories are recorded. And in Sanskrit, the word Nav means 9 and Ratri means night. So it's quite literally the festival of 9 nights. And it's a festival that celebrates the divine mother goddess, or Adi Shakti, who is celebrated in her many different manifestations. Now, Hinduism has many different traditions. And before I go any further, I would also like to make sure that, we are not scholars of the faith. So, and it's a very diverse and complex faith as well. So what we are covering today is a slice. So, we probably will omit stuff. In fact, I know we will omit stuff because there's such a vast diversity of what's out there. But this is our attempt to explain it from our perspective. So do bear with us and keep that framework in mind. So going back to Sanskrit, the Navratri is also a celebration of Shakti. And Shakti is the Sanskrit word for power, for strength, for making things happen. And I love to point this out is that in Sanskrit and in Hindu culture, power, strength, making things happen, these are seen as feminine attributes. And therefore they get embodied in various forms of the loving, yet fierce and powerful Devi, who can be, like loving like a mother at one day, protective like a mother the other day, a very all-encompassing personality. Shakti is also derived from the word shak, which means being able to do. And I think I'd like to say that as women, that we get things done. Devi, so the Devi is both animate and inanimate, and her existence in our belief permeates everything. So she makes the wind blows, the ocean churn. She is the source of all life at the end of the day. So when do we celebrate Navratri? So, well, the Divine Mother, there's no good time. You worship her the whole year round. And Navratri actually comes several times in a year. The most important one, however, is the Sharad Navratri, which typically comes in the September-October timeframe. And that is the one we are here celebrating today and talking about today. But as you can see, this is an approach that follows us through the whole year. And in Hindu communities all over the world, you will find that, there are little temples, big and small, to the Devi that dot communities. And it can be everything from a little alcove in somebody's kitchen with like small oil lamp burning in front of it, to like massive multi-story, multi-acre compounds that, probably draw millions in devotional offerings every day, and everything in between. So Navratri is basically a festival for all seasons. And I'm not sure why my slides seem to freeze up, work fine sometimes, and then the next time they freeze up, which is what is happening right now. Okay, so I think we talked about the divine feminine being omnipresent everywhere. She's supposed to power everything that surrounds us. So you'll find her manifesting in many different facets and many different ways, but three of the most popular manifestations are what we have depicted here. And that's basically Lakshmi Devi, who is provider of wealth, beauty, and fortune. Durga Devi, who's sort of a warrior goddess, protects us from and removes harm from our lives. And Saraswati, who is the provider of knowledge and learning and music. So I think, but again, and this is not a comprehensive summary. There are many other Devis who are manifested and worshipped by many, many millions of people in many other different ways. So why is this important? Why is Navratri important for us? So I think it's really the main purpose is like a lot of festivals. It's grounded in community. It's grounded in a celebration of good over evil. There are many stories behind it. But one of the common themes that run through many of the stories in many, many different parts of India and the world is a focus on the feminine energy, the feminine divine in all her different forms. And as we go through the slides, we'll talk about some of the more popular forms in which she is worshipped. But the common thread is there's always a fight, and the Devi is fighting to restore dharma, or the righteous way to do things. And so at the end of the day, you're celebrating good over evil. Devi can manifest, dissolve, and make herself known in many different ways. She can be gentle, she can be fierce. But one of the most popular stories around Navratri centers around Durga, who I just showed in the previous slide. And we can also see a depiction of her here in a popular folk art. She was basically, the legends have it that many long time ago, there was a demon called Mahishasur, a king who grew very arrogant and tyrannical, and based on a boon that he had obtained for immortality, he basically asked Brahma for a boon and said, I want to make sure that there is no man or animal on this earth that can kill me or defeat me. Brahma warned him against the perils of too much power, but did grant him the boon. And as expected, Mahishasura's tyranny increased and increased. He was seeking to basically conquer the heavens, the earth, all the three worlds, and make life pretty bad for everybody around him. But the boon was protecting him. So then the Devi Durga was created. And she was created, she's like a multi-armed goddess, armed with with a variety of weapons. And she engaged Mahishasur in a battle for, I think, almost a fortnight. And you can probably talk about that story for as many days. But there was lots and ups and downs over this. But at the end of the battle, Durga is able to kill Mahishasur, who is, by the way, very often depicted in popular culture with the head of a buffalo. And the word Mahisha quite literally means buffalo. So a lot of the imagery that we share, that we see and share, is always depicting him as a demon with a buffalo head. So Durga did defeat him. And I think the legends that we narrate during Durga Puja talk a lot about, the problems that happen when too much power gets concentrated in one place. And also being concentrated with the guy who was sexist enough to believe that, no woman could ever do anything to him. And that, of course, in the end was his downfall. So just to check how much you guys have all been paying attention, let's do a quick quiz. So what are some of the other names for the Hindu festival of Navratri? You have 4 options: A, Dashera, B, Durga Puja, C, Festival of Night Nights, D, all of the above. And a reminder on logistics, just go ahead and chat, type in A, B, C, or D into the chat box. So we can take a quick peek at that and see how things are going. So Gayatri will continue to look at that. And in the meantime, don't feel shy. Do go ahead and type in your answers, because we want to make sure you guys are not sleeping and that we're doing a good job keeping everyone engaged. So let's move on as that happens. Sorry, technical. Okay, so let's get a little bit into the history of Navratri and Devi worship. So if there are any history buffs here, they'll know that the worship of the mother goddess is a very ancient and all-encompassing tradition. You can find it in almost all cultures and historical civilizations that have been recorded. In the Indian subcontinent, the Devi has been worshipped in many, many myriad forms since prehistoric times. And I think, as I mentioned, you can find her shrines, big and small, across innumerable villages, towns, and cities. And she, just like a real woman, she assumes many forms. She can be quiet or nurturing, but she can also be fierce and angry and, dissolving creation as we know it. So I think, though, that it's very important to remember that it's not a unidimensional sort of belief. And history of Devi worship in India can be found since prehistoric times, and we'll look a little bit into that. The other point to remember is that the feminine tattva, or essence, is believed to be present in all sentient beings. So we all carry a little bit of masculinity and a little bit of femininity in all of us. And that's true for humans, animals, birds, and inanimate objects. So let's look a little bit into some of the archaeological evidence and history that surrounds the worship of Durga and other goddesses in the Indian subcontinent. So we found and saved a few instances here from different countries and different parts of India. But I didn't, and obviously the list was too big to encompass. But you'll see certain threads that manifest themselves. So if we start on the very left, you'll see that there is a sculpture here from the western state of Rajasthan, and you'll see that there is a female figure who is grappling with a buffalo-shaped figure, the Mahishasur that we talked about, and that is from the western state of Rajasthan from 1st century CE. Then you move on to a statue from the 2nd century CE, which is from the central part of India, the current state of Uttar Pradesh, the city of Mathura. And again, you see a woman, a Devi with multiple arms, slaying a buffalo. If you look at this 3rd sculpture from Orissa, which is on the eastern edge of the Indian subcontinent, you start to see a picture very similar to what we've seen before, where there is a multi-armed goddess grappling with and trampling upon a demon with a buffalo head. And this comes from the eastern state of Orissa. And here we have a sculpture from Indonesia. Again, you can see the common threads, say a female figure standing on a buffalo-headed person with multiple arms and multiple weapons. We could go on. There's even fragments of Durga worship that have survived from Afghanistan and many other parts of the world. But you get the point. We're not in a full history class here. So let's get on from history down to what happens today. So I think to preface again, and for those of you who joined later, in a country, when we're talking about the Indian subcontinent and the countries that surround it, we're talking about a vast swath of the world. We're talking about incredibly diverse communities, many of which have been practicing their faith and traditions for centuries, if not more, and are passionately attached to it. So we are not here to share the truth. We are just kind of showcasing some of the things that are more popular and are more well-known to us. So again, not a comprehensive sampling. If you feel your tradition or something that you care about was left off, our apologies in advance. but let's sort of go into it. So we start with the western edge of India and the states of Gujarat, where Navratri really comes into its own through the celebration of two dance forms, Garba and Dandiya. And this is where you can see the costume, the clothes that are worn. They're just it's really festive. It's really rich, and I'm going to share a video in a couple of seconds, but I want to explain the words that we're talking about here. So Garba is quite literally derived from the Sanskrit word garb, which means the womb. And I think if you remember all this discussion we've been having about a mother goddess and goddess worship. So when these dances happen, they're quite literally happening around a small clay lamp, which symbolizes the womb, or an actual image of the Devi. And the dancers move around in circles as a way of sort of celebrating her, honoring her, and venerating the feminine energy both in her and in all of us. And then Dandiya is a more lively dance that is played with sticks, which is derived from the word danda. So danda gives us Dandiya. And that is more inspired by both the Devi as well as tales of Radha and Krishna. But all of these dances have a lot of circular perambulation, which I'll show in a second. And that reflects sort of not the Hindu concept of time, and also the concept of life itself, which is cyclical. You're born, die, reborn, and everything is sort of moves in a circle. So Gujarat also plays hosts to some massive celebrations of Garba. So I have a picture here from 2018 or 2019, where some 60,000 people came together in the city of Vadodara. And you can see, if you look at the image, you'll sort of see the circles I was talking about. There is a thing in the middle that holds the Garba, and you can see the increasing circles around her as thousands and thousands of people are sort of joining in a celebration together. And these celebrations, as you can imagine, stretch over multiple hours late into the night, often into the early hours of the morning itself. But enough talking. Let's see if we can actually see a video to get a sense of some of the fun and infectious energy that it's a place. And before we go into the video, the music of Garba and Dandiya has also has played a major influence in popular culture in India. So if many of you are familiar with Bollywood, you'll find that Bollywood has a lot of song and dance from Garba and Dandiya. And here we have a little compilation. So I just wanted to check. I hope everyone can hear my video and sound, and we'll listen to this for a couple of minutes.
We can hear it. Sorry? Shmita, we can't see the video. We just see your file screen.
Okay, I'm going to do it again. Apologies in advance for technical issues. Can you guys see this still now?
Yeah, we're good now.
I'll make it bigger. So. All right, thank you for that. So I think we were just putting together a little summary of clips and we could go on. And I think obviously COVID has changed all of that, but I would like to make sure people know that these kind of functions are held widely everywhere, a lot of places, including in the Bay Area, where I think we have almost, it stretches out from the 9 nights to almost 6 weekends of events where you find a lot of similar song and dance going on. And if you look at it, most of you are familiar with the Santa Clara Convention Center. So they're organized, they're nonprofits that actually fill up the Santa Clara Convention Center with these dances for 4 or 5 weekends running, and they're sold out events. So when COVID goes away and life becomes normal again, and these events resume, I hope many of you will get a chance to go check it out right here in your neighborhood. We actually had a really couple of fun months in Sunnyvale, not last year, 2019. It's hard to remember. Last year was a wash, but we'll come back. Okay, so let me go back to my slides. Okay, so moving on from Western India, let's go to Southern India. And the celebrations here take on quite a different feel. And I'm showing a couple of pictures here just for context. So what you see on the side is the palace in the southern city of Mysore, which is really, it's almost world famous for its Dashera celebrations. And the palace gets lit up, and it's obviously a major attraction, both for local, national, and international tourists. But there is also an elephant procession that happens. And you have this amazingly grand procession of elephants caparisoned in gold that walk. And they're actually carrying an image of the Devi Chamundeshwari. And the elephant is caparisoned with about 700 kilograms of gold, just to for those of you who like to track things like that. But I want to hand it over to Gayatri so she can talk a little bit about how Navratri is celebrated in the homes in Southern India, which is, again, celebrating the Devi, but in quite a different way from what we just saw in the state of Gujarat. So Gayatri, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Pushpita. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to my home and welcome to Golu. I'd like to show you a little bit of what I have in my own home today. I'm hoping I can, that's my little Golu arrangement. This is a very traditional South Indian arrangement. And I'm just going to go over a little bit of what constitutes what we call a Golu. It's basically a doll arrangement. And a very traditional part of South Indian, especially Tamilian culture. I come from the state of Tamil Nadu. So this is what we do during Navratri. Nava, first of all, as Pushpita said, is 9 nights. It's just the same as Nueve in Spanish and Neuf in French. So I think a lot of the Romantic languages have their etymology from Sanskrit. Anyway, I'm an educator, so that seeps in every now and then when I'm talking about something. But let me go over the different parts of my Golu. The steps, you can actually get it in Home Depot, but I haven't done that. So we actually filled it in with books and things like that. My daughter's calculus book is somewhere in the pile there. We figured it could use a bit of divine intervention. So she was a particular calculus book being a part of the arrangement. But anyway, it's part of the steps. The first step is a figure of the gods, and you can see Krishna and his, one moment, let me hold it back. Yeah, that would be better. Yeah, Krishna is in the center right there, followed by his gopikas. That's basically his female fan following. And Krishna is always the dark one. He's always dark colored. He's called the Dark Lord in India. It's surprising that many people think that Hindus have color fixation, but it was actually something that came, I think, after colonization. In India, Krishna is always considered the Dark Lord, and it's a very special feeling of adoration we have for Krishna and him being dark. It's very meaningful. And the second step is these two central dolls, which are called the Marapachi dolls, which are basically made of a special kind of wood. They're given to the bride on the eve of her marriage, and she brings them into the home, and she puts them during every Navaratri event. So that's an integral part, the most important part really of the Golu. And then over here, I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm having a slightly hard time managing this and speaking too, but yes. Over here, I have two dolls. These are scenes from Indian village life. It's usually rustic scenes. So these two dolls, they're called Talayati Bommais, which basically means dolls that shake their head, like wobbleheads, kind of. They are, I guess, the two, a merchant couple, kind of prosperous looking, and they're selling grains and rice. And on the right side, you have a scene where there's a well, because the well is the center of village life. It's where you get the water. And you have the donkeys there and people washing their clothes near the well. And you have a few ladies who pack the children off to school, and they're having a little gossip in the morning, I guess. Something universal, some things still don't change, I guess. And then over here, we've got a couple who've come in to have a ritual prayer in the morning, and the priest is leading the ritual. Over here, we have this is my favorite part. And these dolls are usually made of clay and other organic materials. They're very rustic looking. They're not machine cut, or they're not very sophisticated, but I think that's the whole charm of it. It has a very rustic element to it, which is charming, in my opinion. This in particular is a scene of a family couple over here with a child. The father is child on his lap, and it's a 1-year ceremony. The child is 1 year old, and they're having an ear piercing ceremony. It's a big deal in India. And so here's the priest holding the needle, and there's the mom. She's praying that the whole thing should go well, and there's the fond and auntie looking on. And there's also a postman who's visiting, and you actually have these postmen in rural India. Though if Jeff Bezos, who was on his way to India last year, if he had his way, these postmen would become extinct, I guess, in a matter of months. But anyway, that's a typical ceremony that happens. So Golu is made up of scenes like this, as well as dolls that remind us of both the religious aspect as well as the social aspect. And then finally, I have my Durga, or my Ambar, which is the South Indian version of the female divinity. I light a lamp every day during the 9 days, and it's decorated with flowers and with patterns, things like that. And that's really it. That's really my Golu. Thank you so much for being part of it and sharing with me. Pushpita, back to you again.
Guy, we did have a couple questions come in about how you described Krishna as dark, and what does that mean? Could you mind explaining that real quickly for those that don't understand?
Yeah, really quickly, because I want to save that for the end. So, so one of the things is Krishna has not one, but 108 or more names. Krishna is just one of the more popular ones. Hindu texts are very vivid in their descriptions of deities, not just Krishna, but every deity has massive descriptions of their physical attributes, their spiritual attributes, their poweresses. Krishna is one of the words for him. Gopala, Nandalala, Nandakilal, there's many different names. But Krishna was a descriptive word in the sense of what his complexion is. So he has a dark complexion, and therefore he is always depicted as a dark complexioned god. There are other deities who are golden hued. They're described as having the hue of turmeric, the hue of the morning dawn, the hue of the setting sun, the hue of milk. So they're very descriptive ways of describing these deities. And if you go to a Hindu temple, you will find a multitude of deities, and those of us of the faith can actually distinguish which deity is being represented through some of these physical attributes. Also, the weapons they carry, the animal or vehicle they're riding on. There's a lot of knowledge and nuance behind their descriptions. So I hate to be calling him, the Dark Lord is that's just, I'm not sure that I've never heard it described that way. But Krishna is just known as the word Krishna means the dark one. And it is used for Krishna, but for those of you who know anything about Indian literature, there is a very popular epic called the Mahabharata. And one of the central women figures in that is called Draupadi, but she was also known as Krishna because she was also dark complexion, and she was one of the most sought after women of her time. The Mahabharata is basically supposed to have happened in large part because of her. Different story. But she was also known as Krishna because she was also very dark complexion. So these are just more physical ways of describing a deity. It doesn't mean he is the Dark Lord, or let's not try to look at it from sort of a Star Wars
I guess I should
perspective.
just, sorry, Pushpita, I'll just step in there. I'm so sorry. I might have erred on the on a slight. Said the Dark One, not the Dark Lord. I guess I was reading Harry Potter recently and that kind of crept in. Sorry about that. I really meant the Dark One. That's really what I meant to say. And the bigger point I was trying to make is that some people have a misapprehension that Indians value color, but I think that's more of a recent thing that came after colonization. So that was something I was trying to bring in a kind of social context as well. Krishna was prized for his dark skin, and he was revered. So that was a broader point I was trying to make there. The Dark One, I should have said. So thank you, Pushpita, for correcting me there.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. So let me try sharing my screen again, and we'll go on to the next part of the country. Oh, before that, little quiz, just to see how much have people been paying attention. So Navratri celebrates what? A, the feminine divine, B, Shakti, which is feminine energy, C, Devi, a feminine goddess, or D, all of the above. Just like last time, go ahead and text in the choice of answer into the chat box, and we'd love to see what you have to say. So we'll give that a second, and while you guys are doing that, I'll move on to the next slide. Gayatri can make sure that you guys have answered it well. So let's move on to Eastern India. And Eastern India is actually famous in Eastern India, Navratri and Devi worship takes the form of what we call Durga Puja. And I did talk about Durga in earlier slides too, as one of the most popular manifestations of Devi worship, at least in current day modern life. So in the states of Bihar, West Bengal, the streets sort of come live with what we call pandals. Pandals are sort of elaborately designed marquees where massive murtis of Devi Durga and her companions, and as you can see here, her on her mount, which is the lion, and killing Mahishasur, the demon who we talked about earlier. So you will find depictions of Durga, and the pandals are sort of like anything in humans. They almost become like a little competitive, and they'll vie to have a grander display than the next one and a more creative display than the next one. And many times you will find contemporary themes and stories and issues being woven in. But pandal hopping is a thing. Again, pre-COVID, COVID has killed a lot of this. But in the pre-COVID era, and hopefully by the time next year comes around, you start to see these massive pandals go up and dot different neighborhoods, where these neighborhood associations compete to put up the most elaborate display, the most exciting display, draw the most attendees, have the best musicians, dance, all of that stuff come. But popular belief about Devi Durga, especially in Eastern India, is that she is visiting her mother's home, the earth, during these 9 days. And so that's kind of the reason of a lot of the joy and festivity and revelry that sort of permeates the air. Because think about it, if you had an honored guest who visited you for a few nights in a year, you'd go all out. So you clean up your houses, you dress up in your best clothes, you make everything look good, you have a lot of fasting, feasting, all of that stuff going on. So there are many, again, hard to encapsulate Durga Puja in a few pictures. But here we see the Devi in one of her final processions. There's different days. The 8th day is where the 7th day is very important. The 8th day is very important. The 9th day and the 10th day is when her murti is taken out in a procession and basically consigned to the waters again. So in Hinduism, we very much have a belief of we are formed from clay and will go back into the same formless. So formless to form to formless. And the Devi is created from materials like clay and straw, and then is imbibed with life during these 9 days when it's believed that she inhabits it and people are out there celebrating her. And this is sort of her going away ceremony. This is the 10th day when she is in procession to go back. And these are all the women who come dressed up in their best, and they are playfully anointing. So in Bengal, in many parts of India, there is a tradition that when a woman leaves her house to go back to her in-laws' place or on a long journey, they will anoint her with the red kumkum. And so this is basically, they're all anointing each other and the Devi as a farewell that, okay, you know, till we see you next year. So it becomes almost like a mini Holi for those of you who know the festival, but it's a lot of fun. Women smear each other with the red powder and they're out there having a good time. The central picture here shows a Dhanuchi dance, and I'm going to show you a quick video about this too. But Dhanuchi is basically an incense burner, typically made of clay, and you put like you burn some incense in it with coconut husk and maybe a piece of coal, and that gives it that fragrant smoke that you can see in the pictures. And devotees dance in front of the murti as a way of, you know, showing their intense prayer and devotion to the Devi. And so you can see often this guy is being creative, putting it in his mouth, but the lady is balancing one on her head and has got each one, and they've got two in her hand. So obviously she is one of the skilled ones around. But there's, like I said, some friendly rivalry and competition that goes out too. So, but I think the whole Durga Puja, the vibe, it's a very intensely experiential kind of experience, as you can see with the incense smoke, the drumming, the dancing, the visual appeal of the murtis. It's kind of an all-in immersive experience. So let's actually go back and try to show you a little video about it. So you're part of the country where, again, you'll see that the same festival, Navratri and Dashera, show up in quite a different way, but with similar threads running through. So in northern India, again, I don't mean to make generalizations. You'll find Durga Puja in North India and Golus in North India and vice versa. But again, if we're trying to generalize to help people understand, in northern India, you'll find community Ram Leelas, which is sort of community renditions of the story of Ram based on the Ramayana, very popular, and the burning of Ravan. So just for a little bit of context, in Ramayana is one of the two central epics of Hindus that are still revered widely today. And it's a story set in a long time ago around a central figure, Ram, Bhagwan Ram as we call him. And Hindus firmly believe that this is not mythology. So I am not using the word mythology. We actually believe it is itihas. And itihas is quite literally word stands for as it happened. So it's a story that talks about King Ram, who ruled over the kingdom of Ayodhya. And due to a long and complicated reason, had to be exiled to the forest for 14 years, which he went with his wife and brother. And as he was approaching the end of his stay in the forest, his wife Sita was kidnapped by the king of Lanka, Ravan. And she was abducted, taken to the kingdom of Ravan and kept there for a while Ram and Lakshman hunted wildly for what had happened to her, finally located her, and then waged a massive battle to get her back. The battle was fought over the 9 days of Navratri, and there is a lot of stories about Ram praying to Durga to get strength, etc. But anyways, at the end of the day, like in most festivals and community celebrations, good won over evil. Ram was defeated, killed. And in northern India, there is a lot of these massive effigies of Ravan that go up. So if you look at the picture here, you can see how tall these are. And these are like filled with firecrackers. And at the end of the Ram Leela, on the concluding day of the Ram Leela, which is a sort of dance drama and action of the story of Ram that is conducted over a few nights of Navratri, the last day shows his final decisive battle, his victory over Ravan. And then, you know, the effigy of Ravan is set on fire. And it's like, you know, if you can think of July 4th, but a sort of different way of thinking of July 4th, we're just again trying to contextualize. So this effigy will explode in a mass of fireworks, and there'll be a lot of festivity and celebration all around. And that's some of the imagery that you see here. But also in northern India, the nights before the culmination of the Shera, you can see that young girls are seen as an embodiment of the power of the Devi. So people have little pujas in their houses that we call the home rituals called pujas. And in a ceremony called Kanjak pujas, these girls will be invited into their houses and they will give them special treats, special food, and they'll actually worship them just like we would worship another image of the Devi. And so I think, again, it's a lot of fun. It's a great time to be a little girl. You get a lot of pampering, and you get a lot of you get a lot of good food, and you know, as young girls, we'd all look forward to being pampered and all this attention being showered. And it was also, again, like all humans always make it a little competitive. How many did you go to? How many did I go to? So it's a lot of fun again. So while we're on the topics of Ram Leela, so wanted to just talk a little bit more about this. So Ram Leela can be everything from, 10 families of us getting together in Sunnyvale and sort of saying, oh, let's do our own little Ram Leela, which can take like 15 minutes to 15 days, depending on how we elaborate it. But every neighborhood would sort of come together and do this. So there's some really popular Ram Leelas that happen in cities like in Indian cities like Ayodhya, Banaras, Rishikesh, Ramnagar, Satna, Madhubani, I mean, all over the place. And these are these are productions that are professional and they're highly sought after, highly competitive. But it can be everywhere. And, interesting fun fact, in our very own California, there's a Mount Madonna High School that every year has put out an enactment of Ramayan for 40 plus years. Quite a feat, if you imagine, grounded in the community that they are in. So just something to look up, and again, something to check out when life hopefully resumes back to normal. But I think the community enactments is really important to remember, because this is again a time when people would basically come together to do these enactments, irrespective of their background, their gender, their class, set aside the animosities that sort of pervade in a community otherwise. And it can be very elaborately staged productions with people practicing for days and nights, or it could be just quick, spontaneous get-togethers where people come together and either play these roles or help set up the stage and do. So it was an emphasis on sort of a lot of community building, if you want to use that terminology. But Ram Leela is not just in something that you find in the Indian subcontinent. It's really global, and especially wanted to draw attention. And you can find Ram Leelas and Ramayan being read in, Thailand, Singapore, Mauritius, Cambodia, Laos, South Africa, Pakistan, Bangladesh, a lot of these places. So, but in particular, Thailand is very famous in terms of its Ramayan rendition. Ramikin, it's called Ramakin, and it's almost, I think, seen as one of the national epics of Thailand. And the present version that they use and perform all over the world is said to have been compiled by one of the ancient Thai kings called King Rama I, which again goes to show the influence of the Ramayana on Thai society, because many of their kings and their cities are named for figures in the Ramayana. You also have in Ramayans being enacted in Myanmar and in Laos, in Cambodia. There's a lot of history. What you see here are in Indonesia, it actually takes the form of shadow puppet shows. And it's a fascinating art form. I would highly recommend checking out some of the YouTube videos about it. But these are some, I almost think these puppets are like works of art. But just the way they're manipulated and the shadows and the way these stories are told with some really simple tools is really, really quite amazing. So time for quiz. So so as we talked about, different parts of India and the world celebrate Navratri in very different ways. But I don't know if you guys have noticed that there are common threads that run through all of them. Is that true or is that false? Just type in a yes or no answer, true or false, in the chat box. And we'll give that a minute to see. I think I see some responses coming in. We'll move on. Let me take a quick look at the responses. Looks like most folks are getting it, so that's good. So moving away from the community celebrations, we just wanted to talk a little bit about why you find these celebrations being so diverse and yet so omnipresent. Because as Hindus, we sort of believe that divinity is present everywhere. And I keep using the term manifestations, but that's truly what we do believe in. That everything from a small clay lamp which is sitting at the center of the garba to the massive murtis of the Durga Puja, which are multi-storied and take months to create, but then are floated away in the river because ultimately once the manifestation is gone. It stops being a manifestation of the divine, and it just becomes an object again. So you find that it's a very holistic way of looking at things. So everything from those big murtis to a young girl to small day-to-day objects can be manifestations of the divine power that surround us. And so one of the interesting pujas that happens during Navratri is something called the Ayudh Puja, because it's believed that Shakti is not just found in these beautiful images that we have been sharing, but also she is present in everything, in the sickles of a farmer, in the tools in the tractor of a farmer, in the books of an artist, in the instruments of a dancer. And, so you will find that Hindus get together and they'll worship whatever the tools of their trade are. Here you see somebody worshiping a tractor because obviously this is a farmer. On the other side, you'll see somebody who's a musician sort of worshiping their books, which has some which has some old music written in it, as well as an iPad. I guess they use a combination of both. So I think Ayudh Puja is a way to sort of take a step back and look at the world in a holistic way and recognize the functionality and importance of the tools, objects, and devices that surround us and that we use in our day-to-day life. And also that, we sort of depend on these, a lot of the people who do these depend on these for their livelihood. So it's again a way of honoring them, introspecting, and making sure that we're taking good care of the tools and objects that surround us and that give us life in so many different ways. So the other aspect we wanted to touch on was the how all these celebrations are very tied up with an ecological and health perspective. So like many ancient indigenous faiths, Hinduism is a very holistic, all-encompassing way of life that is deeply integrated in the environments we are part of. So you'll find things change by season. They change so much region by region because each region has a different topography, different crops, different weather, different ways of doing things. So the worship rituals tend to reflect that. And so I think that's one of the elements that comes through a lot, and we're going to touch on it very briefly. So one of the interesting things that happens during Navratri is certain parts of the country will do what is called a Navpatrika Puja, which is basically the worship of the Devi through 9 plants. And each of these plants is supposed to be manifesting a different aspect of the Devi and is very beneficial. So these are plants that I think a lot of these plants are things that people are familiar with. There is the banana plant, the kachvi plant, the turmeric, which has gained a lot of interest in the US in the past decade. Pomegranate, ashoka, beet, paddy, bilwa, barley. So again, a wide encompassing, because you pray for a good harvest, but these sort of 9 plants are also taken to represent the whole plant kingdom. And again, it's a way of showing appreciation and reverence for food. At the end of the day, none of us could be around without food that sustains us. Talking of food, like many festivals and many different the celebrations of many different faiths, food is a central part of the Navratri celebrations, both in terms of fasting, which the more technically correct term would be vrat or upvas, and special feasts, often which go hand in hand. So given the complexity, there is no one particular way people do it, but many groups of devotees avoid a variety of foods altogether during these 9 days. The more devoted among us forego solid food altogether for the 9 days and just live on lemonade or water or things like that. But there's also this concept of sattvic foods, and that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But the system of Ayurveda has things of foods in different types of categories. And so during Navratri, it's a time to sort of turn inwards, recharge, relax, focus your energies internally. But the benefits of fasting are also now pretty well known, but it's a big hallmark of this festival, because Ayurveda believes that vrat or upvas rekindles the digestive system and burns the toxins in the body. So you sort of, your body is rejuvenated by kicking out all the lethargy and dullness that may be bothering it at other times, and it's sort of a rejuvenation. So it's a mental rejuvenation, it's spiritual rejuvenation, and it's a physical rejuvenation if you do the fasting or the vrat or upvas part of it. And I think we have our last quiz. So and this might be a tough one because I touched on this one at the very beginning of the slides, but in which month is Navratri celebrated? The options are A, Shravan, B, October, November, or C, Chaitra. And you can type in your answers in the chat. And I think now we can just open it up for some questions. So we are pretty much on time. Apologies for that.
Oh, wonderful. We did have a question come through earlier that if you wanted to recommend some movies that people could watch, some Indian movies that maybe talk about Navratri and some of the wonderful dancing and music we heard.
Yeah, I really wanted to do that, but I couldn't think of one of the per se. It's the thing is, I know there's a genre of Christmas movies, right? And it would be wonderful if there was a similar genre of Navratri movies or Diwali movies or Holi movies, but the Indian film industry hasn't quite worked that way. So you'll find songs that showcase these festivals or scenes that showcase these festivals as part of normal movies. But I can't really think of like the equivalent of a Christmas movie. We do have a couple of books that we found right in the Sunnyvale Library that we can certainly share with the audience, and they can check those out, and also a list of other reading on some of the topics that we talked about.
See, somebody else wanted to know what the quiz answers were. Do you have the quiz answers for us?
Okay, sure. I'll have to. So I think the last one was the month of Shravan. The first quiz was, okay, I'm just going to go back, sorry. So the first quiz asked what are some of the other names for the Hindu festival of Navratri, and the answer was all of the above because, like I said, it's known as the Dashera, Durga Puja, Festival of 9 Nights. The second quiz asked what Navratri celebrated. Was it the feminine divine, feminine energy, or Devi? And again, the answer was all of the above, because depending on who, just many different ways of worshiping the same. The third quiz talked about, do different parts of India celebrate Navratri in many different ways? Is there a common thread that runs through all of them? The answer is yes, absolutely. And we hope you pick that up, because through all the many different ways of celebrating, we see a focus on the feminine side of the divinity, the power that empowers women in day-to-day life, and what energizes men and children in the community to be inspired to do more and revere. And then the last one was, when does Navratri come? And in this particular Sharad Navratri comes in the month of Shravan or fall. So I hope I went through all the quizzes.
Someone asked if you had the list of the movies that you showed in your clip.
Yeah, in the video you can actually see we labeled the movies with the year. So you can certainly in the record, you can certainly find those movies. Well, a lot of those movies. Yeah.
Okay, and I will be sending out the recording of this to everyone next week. All right. Do we have any other questions? Go ahead and type it in chat for us.
So we either did a fabulous job or we made no sense at all.
No, I think that's great. I think it's wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And thank you so much to Pushpita and Guy for their wonderful presentation. And thank you for joining us.
There was a question on color. I can answer that one.
Okay.
So it's actually, so somebody asked, is there a particular color you wear? So I don't think there's a particular color, but in recent, I think over the past couple of centuries, there's been this, and who knows, it may be older, but it's certainly become very popular in the last century. Each night has its own color. So in fact, if you'll find all these color charts float around saying, oh, the first day wear gray and the second day wear orange and the third day wear red. And for those of you who are interested, actually, each of the 9 nights also honors a different manifestation of Devi. Again, we didn't want to get too much in the detail and the religious aspect of it, but there's lots of resources out there for those who want to find out more, and colors.
And if I could just add one thing, coming from South India, the Ambal, the goddess in South India, mostly wears a green sari. a leaf green sari. I'm not quite sure why exactly, but I've usually noticed in most temples, she's dressed in a gorgeous green sari. So for what it's worth.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, everyone who joined us. And thank you for this wonderful presentation. And I learned quite a bit about Navratri that I never knew. So thank you both very much. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Namaste.